Earlier this week, the Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Gwagube, said government is in the process of developing national screen time guidelines for children between the ages of 2 and 6. Emma Sadlier, founder of the digital law company and social media person extraordinaire, joins us now from Johannesburg. Hello, Emma.
Good afternoon. Are you well?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. And yourself?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
How does one characterize this? You've got to be joking that, or it's an important first step, or, yeah. So, response.
Well, my first observation is, what are guidelines? There's no question there is a crisis amongst young people in South Africa and screen time. And I have to tell you that it's not rich kids in the suburbs that I'm worried about. What I'm worried about are the kids who are quite literally left to their own devices all day. We see children, John, as young as I can't even tell you. I'm sure everyone sees it. When you're out in public, you see children being pushed around, even in prams at shopping centres, just glued to their screens. And the stats are alarming, that kids can be just popped in front of YouTube for 8 hours a day at 2 years old is a pretty frightening idea about what's happening to those children in terms of their brain development, developing social skills, all the developmental things that should be happening at that stage are not happening if the children are sitting sedentary staring at a screen.
Because my initial response, without any of your expertise in this area, is what's the point of guidelines? If parents are not concerned about it now and are pleased that digital distraction is available to let them get on with whatever they want to get on with, rather than doing what parents of my generation had no choice but to do, then having guidelines around is not going to change behavior. But maybe, is it perhaps an important first step, or a useful first step?
I think anything that leads to awareness is an important first step. So is this going to be like the sort of Arrive Alive campaign? Is it going to have that kind of status? Are the guidelines going to come with a big marketing rollout where we're going to reach people and start to educate really everybody about the risks of exposing children to these platforms too young? I promise you, I'm on the ground. As you know, I speak at schools every day, and there was a talk that I did last Wednesday which really stuck with me. I was speaking to the kids from grade 4 to grade 7. Literally every single one of those kids is on every single platform. They're on WhatsApp, they're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, they're on Snapchat, they're on Discord. They're all addicted to YouTube Shorts. They admitted to me, over 90% of them admitted to me that they're falling asleep at night watching something on their phones. That's if they're falling asleep at all. There is an absolute crisis when it comes to children, but I have to echo what your sentiments are about the parents, because we can even change the law, and in my dreams we're going to. But if the parents are helping children to flout those laws, and they're not caring about how much time these kids are spending online, then we've got a problem. If we look at what's happening in France, John, which is fascinating, there is a new law that is going to come into force which introduces a crime of digital negligence, which is really for those parents who are putting the 4-year-old in front of YouTube for 16 hours a day. That's actually going to come with criminal consequences. So unless we go that radical a step, is there any point in the guidelines? Look, I do think that guidelines, if they come with a sort of a campaign to roll out and to educate, could be useful. But guidelines that exist on the back end of a website somewhere, I don't think will make any impact at all.
My producer Glynis has just put up on my screen something that Reuters, the news agency, published yesterday. Britain has told parents to curb young children's screen time, advising no screens for under 2s and up to a maximum of an hour a day for 2 to 5-year-olds, because prolonged solo use can disrupt sleep and displace play and exercise. It's brutally obvious, but so they have the same. Well, let's give you some guidelines, because you're all such responsible parents and you follow governed guidelines in every area of your life, and I'm sure you'll do the same in this one. Not.
Well, in the UK, they've actually brought out a baby ban, because you would see kids on the underground from 8 months old watching an iPad. And I do think that international best practice is 0 to 2, 0 screen time, 2 to 5 or 6, cumulatively 1 hour a day. But more than the time-based guidelines, I'm very worried about the content-based guidelines. That popping your child in front of a pre-moderated show like Bluey for 20 minutes is totally different to letting them loose on these algorithmic designed to addict platforms like YouTube, where we see, even on YouTube Kids, the most horrific content. So I think that if it's going to be coupled with awareness, I'm all behind it. I don't think government needs to spend their money researching this. The American Association of Pediatrics produces exactly these guidelines. I think maybe where government could get a bit more involved is guidelines for schools. And that seems to be also what Minister Siviwe Gwarube said yesterday, is that they are going to also introduce some guidelines for AI in the classroom, which I think would probably be more useful. As I say, these guidelines exist. We know what the best practice is. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that a 0 to 2-year-old should not be staring at YouTube all day, and that 2 to 6-year-olds need to be out and learning and playing, and learning by doing. John, probably my worst statistic of last year was the NHS coming out and saying that admissions to hospital for children and visits to ER for real-world injuries has plummeted because they're not falling out the tree and breaking their arm because they're inside playing Roblox. And how do we get children outside again and experimenting and experiencing life rather than staring at a screen?
Yannicka has WhatsApped me, Emma, and I know that she's a medical specialist, and she writes, I listen to the nurses and staff at work. They think it's a good thing for children to be on social media all the time. They think the children are clever if they can negotiate these tools, which then are a status symbol as well.
Yeah, so I see that particularly in the sort of lower LSMs in South Africa, where parents are buying their children, very young children, smartphones as a status symbol. It's one of the first things that comes out the budget, which I think is really, really interesting. I gave a talk at a principals conference on Friday, and one of the principals from a school in the Eastern Cape, a rural school, told me that the biggest issue she's dealing with from a disciplinary point of view at the moment is grade 1 WhatsApp groups, where the kids can't read or write yet, but they're bullying each other using WhatsApp groups, sending voice notes and videos. And I've seen it where people are like, oh, look how clever little Johnny is. They can slide to the next show, the next thing on YouTube, and they can work out how to use WhatsApp. We shouldn't be proud at that. The reason that these apps and these devices are so easy to use is a very calculated thing, and that is that these companies, these tech bros, want our children to be on these platforms as young as possible and as addicted as possible. And if you look at some of these tech bros, Mark Zuckerberg is an example, his children, not one of them has so much as seen a screen. He's got his own school in his garden, which is contrary to Californian bylaws, but he has. And all of the Silicon Valley tech bros send their children to Montessori schools where they do not see a screen until 16 years old. And so if they're creating these platforms which are not good enough for their own children, the idea that they're beneficial to our children is an absolute nightmare.
I mean, here's another one. My assistant is so happy that her 3-year-old son speaks with an American accent from watching YouTube for hours, and she's very proud of that American accent in her 3-year-old child. And that goes to what Sue writes. The parents and carers need to be pulled up as they are constantly on their phones instead of interacting with their children. What about parental examples? And, it's just too easy to point fingers of blame. The biggest, the longest, the most angry finger must be pointed, I think, at the tech pros who've designed these things deliberately and refuse to accept any responsibility for the harm that they are doing. But parents are under, and carers are under huge, teachers, everybody involved in this ecosystem is under extraordinary pressures. And I think one must be careful about assigning blame with too much sort of vicious delight.
I totally agree with you. And that's certainly what came out in this recent groundbreaking precedent-setting case in America, where for the first time ever, Meta and Google, because of YouTube, were held legally responsible for creating an A, addictive platform, and B, harmful platform. And doing so with the full knowledge, because in the discovery process, they had to reveal that for at least the last decade, they've known how harmful their products are for the mental health of children. But they've done damn all about it, because It suits them to have sad children because sadder children spend more time online, and more time online equals more money. So we know that that is a huge problem. And yes, I get it. But parents, somebody says, your contributor who says that they work with nurses. Now, those children where nurses have a shift of 12 hours and then plus commuting time either side, they do not have a parent present all day, which is the reality for most South Africans, which is why I'm seeing the kinds of issues that emanate from children's very early and constant exposure to social media landing up in my inbox. And there aren't any easy solutions. But I think we all do need to work together. And I think as soon as we can start and as broadly as we can, spread the educational messages that I've been trying to spread for the last 13 years amongst all South Africans, not just the kind of rich schools that I get to. And if that's going to be the effect of these governmental guidelines, then yes, I'm all behind it. And I'm hoping that is the case.
Vicky wants to know, her 3.5-year-old granddaughter is addicted to a particular kind of YouTube video, craft programs where they make things. Does it make that addiction better because the content isn't dangerous? I think it still would be around limit the time.
Yeah, absolutely, and the effect on the child. So I've got 3 pieces of advice for parents or caregivers and grandparents, I think particularly, of children under the age of 6. And there are 3 things that I want to talk about. The first is, if it's irritating to you, it's bad for them. It's quite simply, if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with that theme song inside your brain, then that's already messing with their brain development. So that's the first easy rule. The second is, anything that styles itself as educational is a scam. The reason that they style it as educational is so that parents and caregivers are happy to plop the child in front of it and leave them there for hours on end. And remember, with these algorithmic platforms like YouTube, it's all about eyes on screens. So the longer they can have eyes on screens, the more money these companies make. Then the third is, how easy is it for the child to disconnect from what they're watching? There'll be some shows that children watch and they get so lost in it because it's so fast moving and such loud images, and it's just so exciting that the real world becomes grayscale. But when you turn those shows off, it's like taking heroin away from a drug addict. There will be shows that you can show them that it'll end and they'll quite happily go off and play. So my biggest worry about YouTube is that you never get to the end of YouTube. It is an endless thing. So that's the one. And the other is that it's unmoderated content. So I've seen all sorts of horrible stuff pop up, even on the craft shows, even on the shows about Roblox or Peppa Pig or Bluey. I've seen those being abused so badly by content creators. So YouTube, I've got a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. YouTube is totally banned in my house. And the only time it will one day be allowed is if I'm sitting next to them, literally watching with them.
Emma Sadlier of the Digital Law Company, thank you very, very much indeed.